Hey there, super friends. It's Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Thursday, August 19th, 2021. How y'all doing? I know it's been a while. 3 times I tried to record an episode about changes coming to Phasmaphobia. There's actually supposed to be an update at the end of the month here, which I'm kind of excited about, kind of wary of, but, you know. But yeah, I tried to record this episode 3 times talking about, like, all these changes coming and everything, and all 3 times something happened to it, and then I just didn't record for a few weeks, for reasons. So, as far as the changes coming to Phasmo, DK has hired another dev and a lead artist, and looks like the artist is making some really nice looking assets to replace some of the things currently used in the game, and they're making the equipment upgradable, and some equipment, you know, you actually burn through it, like sanity pills. That would make sense, right? You buy 4 sets of sanity pills, that's it. That's all you ever need to buy currently, because even if you use all 4 of them in the course of a contract, when you go to load your next contract, they're back in your inventory. So some items like that will be used up over time. Well, those will probably be single use, but like candles, lighters, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's, I don't want to say they're like making things more realistic, but kind of, you know. So the reason I'm kind of wary of the changes coming, because they're also redoing the difficulty system and the objectives and payouts and experience, and just kind of overhauling the whole game, is I like Phasmo the way it is. Like, that's about playing on amateur, is about the most horror game experience I can take. I don't interact with the horror genre very much, because brain will just take things and run with them, and you know what? I already experienced enough nightmares, thank you very fucking much. But it's been a pretty fun game for Sage and I to play, and it's like been scary enough that it's neat, but it's fine the way it is. Looking at some of the other games in this genre, right, lately InSim's been streaming this game, Obsidio. It's not available for purchase yet. He's been given kind of an advanced copy of it, so he can give feedback and all that. And it looks really neat to watch him play. I don't think I can. So it's entirely possible that with these changes and them building a richer experience, the game gets to the point where it's too much for me. But that being said, I've gotten more than my $20 I paid for this game of enjoyment out of it. Therefore, like, I'm not going to be mad about it or anything. Still probably watch InSim and Zero stream. But maybe just not play anymore. But anyway, so yeah, there's a bunch of changes coming. If you want to know about them, InSim did a video on his YouTube channel that's pretty comprehensive. He's done a lot of videos on this as different news came out, and I think it's the lead artist that from time to time hangs out in his chat and has answered some questions that he's asked about the changes coming. So, yeah, you can go hear him talk about this. Most of this episode is going to be about Magic, because we're not talking about Blizzard or Activision products anymore until they get their shit together. It's not even so much that the lawsuit happened. You know, you might be able to hold on to some kind of hope that it was like there's an isolated part of the company where this shit's happening that's just not being watched closely enough, and now that they're aware of it, it'll be taken care of. But they couldn't even make the soothing noises of, oh, we take these allegations seriously and we're going to investigate. No, they went straight, dude, bro, and said, this is a bunch of bullshit. Like, really? Really? That's what you decided to go with. So, yeah, they're not getting any airtime from me. For all of my, I think we're down to 3 listeners. But Magic, there's always stuff to talk about in Magic, which also has some problems at the corporate level. But today we're going to talk about EventLink and the MTG Companion app. My thoughts on that. So, let's start at the beginning. Is this system, in its current iteration, better than the Word? Not really. Is it worse? Not really. Now, the Word has been around for 20 years, so it has had the benefit of having to go through growing pains, and, you know, I didn't interact with it until, I'm guessing, a lot of the bugs that were there in the early days got worked out. It still did quirky things from time to time, where you're like, what? Why did that happen? And when players would ask me about random weird things, I would just answer with the word do, what the word do. So, I like the idea. It's nice that you can access the system through a web application, not software, on a local machine. I can start the round timer from my phone, which is great because that is something historically I have had trouble with remembering to start the timer. You can't really effectively enter results on a phone. That's one thing I'd like to see, is the web application have better responsive qualities. But maybe it's not meant to work on a phone. That's fine. Like I said, being able to start the timer from the phone is nice. Now, one problem we have been seeing a lot over, it's been mostly the last 2 weeks, is just constantly getting kicked out. So when I show up for the night, boss has the store account logged in, he has the code up and everything. He's already started things. I have my own account for the store boss set me up with, and that's what I log in on my phone with. So it's not that we have the same account logged in 2 different places, though I think this week I'm going to try not logging in on my phone and see if that solves the issue. Maybe it's because it's 2 accounts linked to the same store, which we didn't used to have a problem with. Like, I've been, for the last, what has it been, like 6 weeks or so, that we've been running Friday events. I've been using it this way and not had a problem. But suddenly, we're just like constantly getting kicked out of the system, which is kind of problematic because in your event, you can pop out a separate tab, which has the pairings and the timer on it, which is nice. I like that feature. And that's what we broadcast over our screen. The problem being when we get kicked out, that means the timer is not displayed either. Also, we can't change the font size or the scroll speed of the pairings. And when it shows the pairings on the screen, it's by table number. Nothing in there is alphabetical. You can't organize the players in the lobby or the players that have been enrolled in the event alphabetically, which I would really, really desperately like to see. For events where we kind of expect a larger turnout and we have to cap it, because with EventLink, you can only enroll 48 players in an event. I'm not sure why there is a cap in general, let alone 48. Sounds like a really, really random number. But I also don't fully grasp tournament math. So it could be at 49, that's what pushes you to an additional round from wherever they're cutting off now. I don't know. The only thing I know about how many rounds is if you have 6 players, you can fire at casual, 8 players, you can fire at regular. So if you have 6 to 8 players, it's 3 rounds. Once you get 9 players, you go to 4 rounds. And then after that, I don't really know. Mostly because for F&M and like our pre-release events, well, for F&M, we do 4 rounds. For sealed, we do 3. So, past that, like, I don't know where the cutoff, where it tells you to go to 5 or 6 rounds is. So, that could be why it's 48. It just seems like such a weird and random number. And like you said, I don't really understand why there's a cap at all. I have to pause y'all real quick. So yeah, I don't understand why there's a cap at all, but there is. So like when we did the MH2 sealed, we had to, like, we asked for pre-registration and everything. So everything was tracked in a Google Doc, or Google Sheet, I guess. Whatever their spreadsheet is. And I could resort that alphabetically, which helps when comparing, because after we enrolled all the players in the lobby, we realized we had a mismatch, like we were missing a player, and it turned out to be kind of a data entry error on the sheet. We weren't actually missing a player, but going through and comparing line by line was ugh. Now, I could sort that alphabetically, and that would make things easier. However, when we have a regular sign-in sheet for F&M, so we can verify that, you know, everybody's paid and settled up with the front of the shop, I can't sort that alphabetically. I can't sort my players waiting to be enrolled alphabetically. I can't sort my enrolled players alphabetically. So it's going through 2 completely unordered lists, comparing back and forth, and it's just really annoying. Whereas with the Whir, once you enrolled a player in the event and went back out to like the regular event screen, it automatically sorted them alphabetically. So please give me that back. But yeah, so the pairings aren't sorted alphabetically. They're sorted by table number, and the scroll is pretty quick, and the font size, at least for the screen we're displaying on, is pretty small. Now I can go in through the dev inspector, or through the dev tools, the inspector in Chrome, and manipulate it, but I have to do it every round then. Which again isn't such a big deal, but can we get some customization options with that? Like, you can set default values, so if you add the fields to the table to store the preferences, you can make it a nullable field. And if no values are pulled from the database, use the default values. Like, just have it do what it's doing now. But I really miss using RT tools. Now, we can print paper pairings, that's true. And we can print paper match slips, also true. Which, I'm glad that they left that feature in, otherwise this whole system would be incredibly classist. You know, the assumption that every player has, you know, a smartphone, and more than that, that they have the bandwidth on their data plan, or every store is offering, you know, Wi-Fi connection to their players. Like, we don't have open Wi-Fi at the shop. I'm not even on their Wi-Fi. And I don't think much about the data I'm using for the app and everything, because I have an unlimited data plan, but not everybody does. So it's nice that that option is there. I do like, you know, allowing players to join through the app. I do like that there is a system to filter out, you know, it's not just anybody who puts the code in gets into the event. You know, we have to go and clear it and make sure everything's settled and the books are kept and whatever. I do like that the players can enter results, but I could also override those entries in case something gets messed up, which, I mean, it does happen. Complaints I have about the Companion app is it's got some quirks and some issues. At least once every F&M, one of my players gets a screen that says, "You've been eliminated." I don't know where this comes from, because there's nothing on the EventLink side indicating that they are not in the event. Their pairing's still there. They're not marked as dropped or anything. It's just their app tells them they've been eliminated. Sometimes the screen gets hung up, like you can see where the animation is going for it to slide across to show you your table number and your pairing and everything, and it gets stuck. And so you can't see the table number or the opponent. Which isn't a big deal. When these things happen, players will seek me out, and I will open the event in a page in my phone and do the find in page looking for their name so I can tell them what table they're at. It's not a huge deal, it's a minor inconvenience, but would be nice if they could kind of work out those bugs, or at least give us the control over this display of the pairings so that we could set the settings in a way that makes them the most usable for the players that actually have to check the screen and everything, as a kind of backup plan for when these issues happen. I'm sure you've heard by now there are no manual pairings. We don't miss it that much. It was something we very seldom used. And honestly, if you were relying really heavily on manual pairings, you probably shouldn't have manual pairings, because it's not something you should be using frequently. The only times we ever really used it is if we had an uneven number of players and somebody rolled in within like the first 10 minutes of the round firing and the timer actually counting down. I guess it wouldn't even have to be the timer counting down. If they came after pairings were issued and games started, but before we were like 10 minutes into the clock, we would just manually pair them with the odd player out, And, you know, instead of having to buy that round, that player that didn't have an opponent would play against this person that just came in. That was pretty much it. I'm sure in a larger event sense, there are more uses. You know, keep in mind, I'm pretty much just an F&M judge. But it's not that big a loss, in my opinion. After the round has fired, any late enrollees then have to be given a round 1 loss. You used to have the option to give them a round 1 loss or a round 1 bye. Again, the only time we would use the round 1 bye is if we had an even number of players. If they would have been on time, we would have had a player having a bye that round, and they arrived pretty close to the start time of the round. But honestly, like we say, our F&M starts at 7. It's usually somewhere between 7:15 and 7:30 when we actually fire the first round, between, the players that show up at 6:55 and a line forms that needs to be taken care of, and, any bookkeeping stuff we have to do on the back end, verifying that all the players in the lobby are on the list. Yeah, it takes some time. So if your aim is to be there by 7 and you're not there by the time we actually fire the round, I think you need to leave a little bit earlier. But I mean, some players don't have that option. They're coming straight from work, and we try to be sympathetic to that. Also, Pennsylvania, I'm sure you've heard, has 2 seasons. We have winter, which is snow and ice falling out of the sky, and construction season. And you're not always very well informed on where the construction is this week. I have to pause y'all again quick. Oh, man. So, we try to be sympathetic to everybody's life outside of the game and all, but there does come a point where it's like, you gotta watch being too sympathetic, and then you're not being fair to the players that did come on time, and it turns into a whole thing. So anyway, manual pairings I don't really miss. The option of giving a bye for the first round for late entries, again, it was something we used on occasion, but not terribly frequently, so I don't really miss it. I miss the alphabetical listing way more. Let's see here. So, again, I'm not saying it's worse than the Were. I'm not saying it's garbage. There are some quirks that need worked out. There are some missing things that really should be there. One of the big ones being Two-Headed Giant is not an event type. Now, there's no long-term stat tracking anymore, right? There's no Planeswalker points, there's no ranking, there's none of that. So, what we did for the Forgotten Realms pre-release was, for the Two-Headed Giant event, we just enrolled 1 player from each team. The problem with that, though, is it affects allocations and affects the store's WPN level, how much pre-release engagement they have. So, players that, say, play at a shop that doesn't draw very much for the pre-release because it's a bunch of spikes playing that play on Moto and Arena, and therefore they've already played with all the new cards and the pre-release isn't exciting to them. I can understand the argument for wanting to decouple like WPN level or reduce the emphasis pre-release or the impact pre-release numbers have on your WPN level. And that's a discussion I can engage in. But for every, like, entrenched player that has started with the whole, pre-release is irrelevant, we should just do away with it. No. There is a significant player base, at least at my shop, and I understand, like, my shop's words. Oh my god, I lost the word. People who play at my shop, our composition is different than people who play at your shop, and that's cool. But, like, we have a significant player base that we only ever see for the pre-releases, and they get excited about it, and, like, it's a big deal to them. Why take that away? Like, they don't care that Standard's already been solved because the cards have been out on Moto and Arena for over a week because they're not playing Standard. They, they don't care that everybody's already figured out the busted things because they're not reading these articles, they're not watching these streamers. Magic's a fun thing that they do around their kitchen table. Like, our late Friday event, so we do like a 4 o'clock, a 9 o'clock on Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday we do, it's like 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock start times. The 9 o'clock on Friday, which replaced our midnight pre-release, is where our more entrenched players come out and play because the prize support's better for that event. But all the other ones, it's, players that don't want to play in the aggressive competition. I wouldn't say newer players, but more casual players. And they get really excited about this event. And I like to see them. So please don't take it away. Like I said, I can understand reducing the impact pre-release numbers have on maintaining WPN level. Especially if you're getting good turnouts for other sanctioned events, right? But don't take away the pre-release. Anyway, yeah. So, because pre-release has such an impact on that level, eliminating half the players you actually have coming out for your pre-release for, at least these two events can kind of hurt. So, can we please get the two-headed giant format in? Also, there have been changes over the weeks that I've been using it. It's just the changes, they have fixed some things. Like, there was a point where if I manually enrolled somebody, I could not drop them. So you can manually enroll, which is good. And for the one F&M, I had a player come that he was having trouble getting the companion app to log him in. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll just manually enroll you. And I didn't think to ask the email address. If you manually enroll somebody using their email address that's tied to the account they use for Companion, which is usually your Arena account, if they then get signed in through the Companion app, it'll sync it. If you don't use the email address, it doesn't have anything to tie them. We don't have BCI numbers anymore. I didn't think to ask for his email address, which, that was my fault. So I just manually enrolled him, and then he ended up being able to enroll through Companion, and I couldn't remove the manual enrollment. I couldn't drop him before we fired the event. Luckily, we had an uneven number of players, so the person who got paired with the manual enrollment of him just got to buy that round. And I was able to drop that enrollment for the next round. So they fixed that, which is great. But we also, when you go to delete a round now, like if something got messed up with the pairings or whatever, you have to type delete in all caps in a text box in the confirmation box and then confirm. I don't understand the purpose of this. I think when you go to delete the round, having a confirmation box come up and say, if you do this, you're going to lose all this data and there's no way to undo it. Are you sure you want to do this? I think that's fine. I think that's good. It's quality. I don't understand why I have to type delete in a text box, but fine. Whatever. I'll do it. Not a big deal. The other thing they added is I now need to generate the standings at the end of each round before I can generate the pairings and create the next round. Why? And again, it's an insignificant inconvenience. It's an extra button I have to click and an extra process I have to wait for it to go through. But it's just like, why? When there's other things that need to be fixed. I can understand if we were in the late stage of the software development cycle with this, and it's like, okay, what can we add? Sure, let's do this. Because you could generate standings before. It's not like there wasn't an option. I don't understand why I need to do it every round. Now, one thing I am noticing, and again, because of the cap in software, it's not like you could run premier level events with this anyway. I don't recall selecting a rules enforcement level when creating an event before. Because like Boss and I played around with it a little bit before our first F&M back, where we did the MH2 sealed, and we created dummy events and everything, and we poked and prodded at it. I don't recall having to select a rules enforcement level, which would indicate that there's no way to tell it you're playing at competitive REL where you need to track warnings. So at F&M, you don't really give formal warnings. It's F&M's kind of, and regular RELs kind of seen as more of the like teach and learn level. It's half a step up from casual play, where you're starting to engage more with the actual tournament structure and everything. So we pretty much have two levels of action to take when something happens. It's either a, let me explain to you how this works so you know in the future, or get the hell out. Like, that's it. There's no formal warning that's tracked anywhere. Whereas at competitive REL, you have warnings, and once you generate too many warnings of the same type, it upgrades in penalty to things like game losses and match losses. Whereas at regular REL, it's more of a, gentle, so this is how things work, this is how you should be doing things. Unless you see a player that just kind of demonstrates an unwillingness to observe the rules of organized play, in which case you eventually got to tell them, like, look, if this is not something you are going to adhere to, we're going to have to ask you to not play in these events anymore. Or they, really do something heavy in the unwanted behavior, like dropping a racial slur or, you know, an LGBTQ plus phobic slur or, you know, something along those lines, in which case it's just a straight up get out. Nope. So we used to track the warnings through the word, so that if you had multiple judges, and we usually did when we did the IQs, if, say, I issue a warning to somebody and then, you know, one of the other judges in the event issues a warning to the same person for the same thing, when they go to enter it in the WER says, hey, here are other warnings that have been issued to this player for this event. And we could track it through there, so it wasn't like trying to just remember, like, wait, is that the one we had to give the warning to before? So it does not appear as though EventLink will do that. And I know WotC's like done away with the whole GP thing and all that. I don't know how long that's gonna last. There's rumblings that they just kind of want to wipe their hands of it, but want to allow other people to do it, so they're not sponsoring these events and not basically putting out the money for these events. If you wanted to run a premier level event at this point, you could do it through MTG Melee. I believe they added tabletop support where you can print pairings and match slips and everything. So there is an option out there, just EventLink ain't it. And I'm trying not to be too critical of it. I mean, I got accustomed to using the WER. I've been doing it for a few years now. I knew where everything was, you know, knew how to do all the things. Also, there's no draft setting in EventLink, as far as I know. Unless they added that recently. Which, there is sealed. So, it'll actually, when you start the event, it'll allow you to, like, it'll give you the deck building timer and everything. But yeah, because drafting's kind of handled somewhat separate. Drafting assigns seating. So why you assign seating in draft? In case you ever wondered about it. So, in a draft, the player in the 1 seat will play against the player in the 5 seat, round 1. 8 will play against 4, and it crosses over the table. And this is so you're not playing against the person, round 1, that you were passing to or was passing to you, and therefore has a pretty good idea of, like, what colors you're on. Sure, if you're, like, really good at this stuff, you can probably track through the pod, like, what's been going around, what you stopped seeing coming around, and especially because you left, then right, and then left again. You can probably build some kind of idea of what everybody's on to a limited degree of certainty outside of the players directly on your left and right, but if you're really good at it, I suppose. I don't know. I don't even really pay much attention to the players on my left and right, to be honest. But I also, like, I just do things for fun. I'm like, oh, I'm going to take this big stompy creature that's going to suck in this draft, but it's going to be fun if I get to cast it. I mean, I'm playing Modern Enchantress right now, sheerly for the opportunity to cast Emrakul the Aeon Storm. Like, this is the whole reason I wanted to play the deck. If you have never played the 15/15 Annihilate 6 Flying Spaghetti Monster, you haven't lived. And then it has the added benefit of making big silly angels with Sigil of the Empty Throne. But yeah, I suppose if you're very astute and have much more better mind for this shit than I do, you could do some kind of tracking throughout the table, but there would be some degree of question, and you're purposefully cross-paired round one so that you're not playing, there's no chance you're playing against the person that's been passing you cards or being passed cards from you. So it's actually kind of important to have its own setting so that it can seat the players in the pod and pair them appropriately in the first round. So yeah, there are some things missing that I would like to see fixed. There are some glitches with the system, which, as far as the logout thing and even the glitches with the app, the only way they're fixing that is to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. I don't think there's a way you can really test that in a smaller environment, because it probably has something to do with your threading and how many accounts are hitting the server at the same time. We've noticed it starts happening around round 3 for us, like beginning of round 3, maybe the end of round 2. So I'm on the Eastern time zone, so that would be about the time where we've gotten the players that are in like the Central time zone, or the stores in the Central time zone also starting their FNMs. Provided, of course, assuming that all FNMs are starting around a similar time of day locally. So it could be just the system's getting overwhelmed and can't hold that many sessions. Well, actually, the session's all in the browser, but anyway, can't hold that many active connections, so it's dropping them. And as far as the app thing, that's the advantage iPhone and iOS specifically have in the market, because Apple creates the OS and the hardware. The OS can be optimized for the hardware it's going to be on, whereas the Android OS, it's kind of like Windows computers versus Apple computers. There's a reason that there's not a whole lot of customization you can do with a MacBook, but with PCs you can customize all kinds of shit. And why, say, iOS can run at a smaller footprint on your system resources than Windows can is because Windows has to accommodate for like 20 billion different configurations, whereas iOS or Apple's OS doesn't really have to, because the hardware setup is pretty known. But from a developer standpoint, for an independent app, you don't have that intrinsic knowledge of the hardware. Like, sure, you can look up specs on the latest iPhones and whatever, but If you're developing a native app for different OSs, it can be quirky. Like, chances are, when you develop the iOS app, you can pretty well depend on, like, you can test it on your iPhone and pretty well depend on it working the same for any other iPhone that uses it. Android's a little shakier because the configurations in the individual devices can vary so widely, not to mention screen sizes and everything else. Whereas iOS, like, you know all the screen sizes. Because now we have there's the regular model and then the Plus model. It's a little bit bigger, but, like, it's pretty set. Whereas Android OS being available on such a wide variety of devices with different screen sizes and everything else, as somebody who specializes in responsive front-end development, I can tell you, it's a lot. Now, I focus in web application development, not native app development, so it is a little bit different because I have to code the front end of a web application to work on either OS. iOS is kind of the bane of my existence because the operating system itself is a little quirky in how it handles different things, and they seem to just randomly change shit. So there have been many times that once we deploy to a testing environment that can be accessed not on the client network, and you can actually access it on the devices rather than using emulators, you discover there's an issue in iOS, and we got to try to figure out what it is. And again, it's kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, because you don't have access to the tools you have when you're developing for the desktop application, or, you know, even using the emulators, you still have access to inspector tools and everything. You can track what's going on in your script and all that happy stuff. You can see the console, so you can use console logs to track, you know, what data is being passed through and everything else, and you don't have access to all that on the actual mobile devices. So it's going, okay, this is acting weird on the actual device. Why is that happening? Doing some research, seeing if anybody else has already found this bug and figured out what's causing it, and implementing different solutions, deploying it to the environment again, testing on the device again, and seeing if it worked or not. So I imagine native app development goes much the same way. But again, you know, as far as the Android OS, you can't possibly test on every device that your players could be using. Like, you just can't. There are just too many of them. And each different manufacturer, you know, mods the Android OS in different ways. And, you know, adds whatever bloatware and whatever, and they mod the Android OS to have that, like, kind of custom feel. So it's why, like, Samsung has become, like, the Galaxy models have become, like, the high-end Android devices, and the OS feels different than if you're using on Nokia or Motorola, or if you're using the Pixel. So, as far as those two particular issues, I imagine it's going to take a bit of time and some trial and error to fix it. And I just hope that nothing gets significantly broken in the attempts to fix it. That's another thing you got to be concerned about, is, you know, implementing some code to try to fix the issue that just causes a different issue. And you might be able to catch that in testing, but also maybe not. I also don't really believe WotC has that robust a QA department on this stuff. Just seeing what happens when other software updates. Like, developers will test their changes, but they get tunnel visioned because you're working on fixing this problem. So you test the changes for this scenario, and you can try to test for other scenarios and like try to do the most complete unit testing possible, but ultimately you're not a tester, and you're kind of wrapped up in the this is what I was trying to fix. Whereas, you know, testers will, like, that's what they do professionally. So they know all the silly paths to take to try to break things and everything else. And it's a whole different mindset that, well, it's a whole different skill set. And too many companies anymore have done away with QA departments because they're like, we don't need this. Developers, just test your code. And it's like, well, I did. It's, recently I got conscripted to work with the testing team on the project I'm working on. And at first, like, they assigned something to me that was a thing I developed. And I pointed that out, and they were like, oh yeah, we thought that was a good idea. And I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. I mean, if it's in testing, that means I tested it, and I thought it was good. Like, and you're just giving it to me to test again. So, yeah. The QA department is important for preventing bugs from going to production. So, should you ever decide to start a software company, remember, you need a QA department. You need a good QA department. And you need to value them, because they are important. But anyway, so yeah, it has promise, and I hope to see them continue to work to make it better and everything. Just right now, I wouldn't say it's better than the WER, but we can't use the WER anymore because you can't issue new DCI numbers, and you need a DCI number for the WER. So it's not terrible. It's just, it's got some things that need to be worked out before I would officially call it better than the WER. Right now, it's about on par. So that's not too bad for the maiden run of it, so to speak, you know, for the early iteration. And, you know, they've had a lot of time to get the WER to where it was, and they're just going to take some time to get this to be something better. But that's all I got for you today. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I'll talk to y'all again next week. I don't know. Stuff's happening. There's a lot. So, good luck at your F&M this weekend if you're going.